Good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is Shari De Silva. I'm the Chief Curator of the Jeffrey Bauer Trust. And we're delighted that you are here for the second in our series of 3 talks that we're doing jointly with the Royal Thai Embassy in Sri Lanka. Our speaker today is Kulapat Yantrasast, the founder, managing principal, and creative director of Y Architecture. Born in Bangkok, he initially studied architecture there before going on to do his master's and PhD at the University of Tokyo. After graduation, he worked for 8 years as a close associate to Japanese architect Tada Ando, leading several important cultural projects in the United States and Europe, including the Museum of Modern Art in Fort Worth. Kulapat opened Y Architecture Workshop in 2004 in Los Angeles, California. And in recent years, he has acquired a reputation as one of the art world's preeminent architects, designing genre-defying spaces with a focus on the human impact of the arts. And his interdisciplinary approach to architecture and design is inspired by his passion for food, ecology, and human society. And he views each project as a mix of ingredients that yields its own unique recipe. His ability to unite art and architecture is, of course, something he shares with Jeffrey Bauer and makes him a perfect candidate for our series. He's the first architect to receive the Silpathorn Award from the government of Thailand. And since 2005, he has served on the Artist Committee of the Americans for the Arts, the nation's oldest organization for support of arts in the society. He's currently a board member of the Pulitzer Arts Foundation and the Noguchi Museum in New York. Recent major museum and cultural projects include the Department of Byzantine and Eastern Christian Art at the Louvre, the Rockefeller Wing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the DIB Contemporary Art Center in Bangkok, which just opened, and the full list is really very extensive. We're extremely grateful to you, Kalapat, for joining us today, as well as the Thai Embassy for its support, and for all of you for braving this rainy day to join us. And after your talk, we'll have some questions. Over to you, Kalapat.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Such an honor to be here. I think I'm very honored that one of my heroes, Apichatpong, is here, who actually studied architecture and become an artist using film media. And I got a lot of inspiration from him, and also Saskia as well, who's a painter who also lives in Sri Lanka. I think the idea that we're surrounded with people, art and architecture is meaningful. And so I'm very happy. So this will be a happy talk. Yes. So, okay. So quickly start, just how I talked about myself, and I'm not going to explain too much of the work because you can look at that. So, I was born in Thailand and spent around 15 years in Japan. So these are two of my kind of upbringing in some sense. And of course, we are here in Colombo, and this is my kind of journey, kind of eastward as I was born and move over. And I think a lot about culture because I think architecture at its best is part of culture contribution. It built who we are and who we want to be. And so, of course, in Thailand, you think a lot about Thai food and Thai culture, Japan at the same time. So the one I think about it that I kind of think is like Thailand is this guy over here, a skinny guy in the middle seat between China and India, right? So when you're a small person between big giants, you learn to behave. You learn to kind of keep your elbows. You learn to kind of take cues from the two giants. Japan, on the other hand, is an island all the way to the edge. He has a whole world to himself. He doesn't have anyone bothering him, and he have time to think about who he is, identities, and things like that. When in Thailand, we never have time because we always get either invaded or influenced by a variety of things. And so this kind of reflect who we are in a very crude way about that. And food is what kind of give us that, at least in my case. Japanese food is all about clarity and abstraction and refinement. All of the influence are there, from Korea, from China, from other places. The Japanese might not want to admit that that was influence because they have time to actually build not only the art form but also the narrative to support that art form. It seems like it just fall from the sky and all of a sudden you have sushi. But in reality, there's a lot of things that come through. But the ability to refine is definitely in the Japanese DNA. The Thai, on the other hand, is really all about diversity. We mix everything well. We're so excellent about mixing things together and make something wonderful out of it. Uniqueness that come from, when I look at that, it's like, well, there's really nothing original here. You have Indian, you have indigenous, you have Chinese, but by the mixing and trusting our taste, we are able to bring some clarity to that kind of mess, which I think is something that is perhaps very helpful in our time now. And what I kind of propose is that, what I kind of jokingly say that culture itself is moving from sushi to pad thai because it's not one person defining what culture is. We don't have a dictator. We don't have a king or emperor to define what culture means. Culture is coming from people that look like us, but people who don't look like us at the same time. So how are we defining that? So that's something that I would like to start with because I think architecture is addressing that sense of polarity and diversity that we need to do. And architecture in general is the art form of hosting. We host, we're not as sexy as fashion, we're not as clear as painting and sculpture, we're not as good as food or music, but our ability is we like the big sister. We host everyone. We host music and performance and art and painting and even film. So within that, the power in architecture is in being inclusive, being generous, be able to make a place for everything to happen. So I think it's important, and that's why this is. I'm talking about my firm. It's called Why, and the reason why I want to start because I think there's a lot of damage to the professional architecture as a genius lone wolf hero. That if I'm sure everyone know the movie and the novel The Fountainhead. I hope we do. It talked about this genius supposed to be, in a way, inspired by the life of Frank Lloyd Wright. He doesn't listen to anyone. He's just a genius. He draw everything in an hour. I mean, the client have to worship him. At the end, he was able to demolish his building because it was not for his vision. But this is really what, this is Ayn Rand, what architects want to believe, and what the client, the society want to believe architects in that way, which is damaging because it means that we know everything without having to talk to anyone, which is something that against what I believe. So, I mean, this is something that I say, when you have a hammer, everything will look like a nail to you. So I think we're not a hammer, but we're like a full toolbox. So we have a variety of things, architecture, landscape, objects. We have a lot of many things. And I feel that, when I started the office in the beginning, I felt that my my team, oh, thank you. Much better. Oh, this is good. Wow. Yes. So my team was solving every problem in life with architecture. And it's, I remember talking to one of my team and they're trying to solve everything in architecture. And perhaps the solution is to plant a tree. Is a solution, right? Rather than putting a wall, like sometimes you have a privacy issue. You learn from Bawa. Privacy doesn't mean walls all the time. Privacy mean other ways. But when you study architecture, everything is architecture to you, which is something is very limiting in our thinking. So I feel it's necessary for a company to have variety of people so that you know that there's not only one game in town, that you can do other things. So that's part of that. And one thing that I'd like to tell my team is that, this is copy from Howard Schultz from Starbucks, who say that we're not in the coffee business, we're in the people business. So I told my staff, we're not in the form business, we're in the people business. So we need to understand what we're doing. We're not form maker, we're actually placemaking for people. So anyway, so this is part of, what it is. Quickly talked about that. People is very important. This is our office in Los Angeles. This is some of the place we do. I know I'm having so many slides, so I'm kind of rushing through. This is what I learned from building my own house. This is my house in Venice Beach in California. I didn't plan on building my house at all. I hated doing anything for myself, but I couldn't find anything that I can afford. So I built it. But by building it, I realized my own interests, what I love, the Thai kind of way. I think in a Japanese way, but I live or my habit is in the Thai way. So by making something for myself without overthinking it, it allowed me to kind of get to who I am. So that was a part that I was really learning and enjoying a lot from. This is part of the house. We make all the furnitures and things like that. This is again part of the view. It look a lot much messier than now because there's more stuff. This is that. Okay, the subject today is museums because I do a lot of them, and I think that it's so important to us to understand what museum could help us. Museum, sad as it is, museum itself is a colonial invention from 19th century when the colonizers basically built museums in Europe mostly to talk about what they have from the colonies and other places. So we are working against that typology of possession and conquer. How do we change from that to something else? Is something that the world is trying to address. So I'm approaching it from a sense that this is a place of culture. This is a place we all belong. So I try to look at it not from collection and possession, but more how can museum be a place of many things. So what I say here is like museum is moving from temple to playground. This is a place that no hierarchy. People should be able to enjoy what they want to see. They look for source of discovering. They look for connection with other human being, and more. I will quickly go through this quickly. So the first point is museum can be a place of connection, community, connection from people to art, between people together. This is a project that we did in not a museum but an art center, but it's a project that it's a full co-creation with children in Palo Alto, which is in Silicon Valley. We we spent 2 years designing. So what you look at is not all my design. I just allow everything to happen with the children. We have a process of getting to know each other and designing the program and such. So this is part of the project. I was much younger then, but I think it was 2 years of just talking and thinking about if you have $20 million, what can be the best for the community. So this was the process of that. So I'm very proud because it's not a form making or not my style. Because when they look at that building, I don't see myself. I see them and I see me. So that's part of what I kind of surrender for them to do. Part of that is the building itself, all the program, all the colors, everything was done in collaboration with the children. At that time, now they're grown up now. So this is part of that. So they're the one who pick. We want a stage, we want a recording studio, we want a dance, we want graphic design, we want all of these. This is another project that we did in New York, just an old, 100 years old museum, the oldest hall of the Natural History Museum in New York that we renovated. In this one, we work closely with the American Native Americans. I spent 3 months living with them, variety of 12 nations, to try to understand. The end result looked normal, but it go deep into how these people want to be represented. I learned a lot about understanding how they see themselves, how they want others to see themselves. So this is exactly, it's a design project, but it's more about trying to understand each other through this kind of exhibit in a museum context. It's part of that. I also did the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, which used to be an old library that we expanded on. Again, nothing to talk too much about the design, but the idea of being able to bring a sense of culture to different kind of people in a place like that. In this project, I have a concept called From Peacock to Octopus. The idea is that museum is built like a peacock, which is you go into a big hall, and from then on, you go into all of these, right? And so museum have to open, everything have to be open together. So I promote the idea of decentralize a museum so that things can open on their own. If you want to open a classroom late, you could, or the coffee shop. So it kind of deconstruct in a way that allow it to be more flexible. Because when you talk to museum people, I was like, why can't you open late? Because they said, well, you have to have so many guards to guard everything. Some people want, for example, sometimes they want to do art classroom after school, but they can't because the museum. So it's not design per se, but it's about the engineering allow museum to be more flexible and more useful for people in the community. Is again part of that. This is we built this. This is we have a team lab exhibition as well. Another museum, Street Art Museum, similar vibe with the decentralized space as well. The old building is 1926. This one we did in 2017, I think. That's that. Again, the idea of what I use quite a bit is the idea of acupuncture, architecture. And what it means is that, we're not just adding another wing to a building, but by adding something, bringing a sense of acupuncture in and around the museum to make it work function better. Because when you look at museum, just like everything else, it's like your body. There's a lot of congestion. There's a lot of problems. So the clarity in circulation, in experience, need to be made as you design everything together, not just add something onto it, but recharge it in a different way. This is the museum. Again, one thing that we do is we open it up to the public, to the university around it. Part of that, gallery spaces. We're also working with Renzo Piano on the Harvard Art Museums for around 4 years, working with the curator to we design all of these and place every object from the collection. So this is again the process of creating a museum for teaching. So the slogan for Harvard Art Museum is close-looking critical thinking, to be able to kind of discern a way of having identity. So this was designed as a teaching tool for professors and students as well. You see that this is part of that. So that was connection. Now we talked about discovery. So this is again, we also not only doing the architecture, we do also scenography or expert design as well. Again, this one with Renzo Piano in the Oscar Museum, the Can Museum in Los Angeles, which is finally have a museum about film. So we work closely with the 16 trades of the filmmaking to represent how they want their work in a film to be represented. So it took around 2 years to work with them and build the whole narrative of the museum with them together. This is, of course, Wizard of Oz, which is shot in Hollywood and lead on to a variety of support. Of course, costume, easy to mention. Next one, I'm sorry, keep going on. This is a museum that's just about to start construction in Manila, of a temple for the Ayala Foundation, which is one of the wonderful visionary nonprofit. This is right on the river. Again, these are rendering, but it's being built. So the idea, in my case, when my subjective read of the Filipino culture, it's so holistic. It's not just about painting, it's about dancing and music and food, and just like Thai, just like any other place. So I feel like a museum that only show one section of that is missing the big picture. And I feel that our generation is the generation that have to put everything back together, because from the 19th century, from the 20th century, if you follow Foucault or something like that, they were trying to understand things by breaking them apart, right? People were trying to understand culture by cutting it to, if you want to look at painting, you have to go to the painting gallery. If you want to listen to music, you go to concert hall. If you want to listen to opera, you go to the opera house, right? If you look at, sculpture, you have to go to a glyptothek. So all of these are a way of trying to understand culture by cutting them into different pieces. I think that our generation is the time we have to bring everything back together, because it used to be that way before the modern time, before we try to know it all. So as opportunity to build a museum like this, I feel like we need to make places, in this case, because the weather is similar to this, indoor, outdoor performances, music, pop and classical, indoor, outdoor, there's a white box and black box, so you can do all kind of art, there's an education component to it. Again, in this one, it has a big component about, gathering social events and things like that as well. So the river is right outside outside, so this is kind of open up to that. I was, inspired by the palm fronds and the idea of tropics. I want everything to feel like it belonged to the Philippines. So there's part of that, which is different than, let's say, other museums that I do. So that this is deep in Bangkok, which are about to open December 20th. The building is completed. That's why we took the photograph. It is, one of the most dedicated art collecting family in Bangkok, which I really have the opportunity to really get to know. Sadly, Kunpech, the father, passed away 2 years ago, but the legend continued with his family. I think it would change Bangkok art in a sense that it's a very serious museum. In the sense of the standard itself, this is a courtyard. You see, it's a three-story warehouse that we converted and expand to. I create a courtyard. I mean, I'm in a country of courtyard. I love courtyard, so it's courtyard is where life happens in general. So be able to kind of build the rest of the building up. There's a big art billboard that will be something that you can see from the expressway, which is nearby. We have the James Sorrell here. So the idea is that the museum, the ground floor will be fully open as a flexible space, second and third, and then the courtyard. And, so even after the museum closed, you can still use the spaces and things like that. This family loved music. So the idea that you can play music everywhere, even in the parking structure underground, we make it high and acoustic work well so that you can do concert in the parking. So I think that's a part of what we like to do. This is as you walked in. I think I love the idea of water because Bangkok used to have a lot of water. It's a way of slowing people down when they arrive into the place itself. So that's part of that. The courtyard again. Again, we're adding this building on to have offices and artists in residence and restaurants and other things in there. This is the ground floor space and this is a third floor space. So it opened December 20th. Everyone should come, please come to Bangkok to see it. A part of the space, construction. Uh, okay, and now I'm moving on from connection to discovery to empathy. And the reason why I feel like it's important is because I think museum has now become a place that we come to know the others. Right. I myself was lucky when I was young. My parents dragged me through museums in Paris. That's when I saw other art for the first time. And when I design a museum, for example, like the Met, which opened to great success in May, these are Africa, Oceania, and the ancient Americans art. I'm not really thinking too much about New Yorkers. I'm thinking about people like me, Asian kids coming to big city for the first time, come across art from Africa, right? So it's not just about the local, but museum in big cities are becoming a point of understanding what other cultures look like. So of course we want the scholars to love what we do, but I care more about people that don't really know these materials. How do you trigger the interest to get into it and build a sense of empathy, build a sense of understanding who these people are, why do they make this kind of objects, why does it relate to me, right? That part of story, I'm working very hard with the curators to try to bring that story out. We change the glass so we can look out to Central Park and see all those material. It took around 9 years to finish this project, so it's all of these. It's a great success. It's wonderful to see people loved it. This is our beginning, start with the models, with my team, looking at all the materials together, looking at how to make this object come alive from different places. This is that. The detail, behind the scene. We work closely with the casework designer in Italy to make sure everything is easy to use. Again, the detail here, construction, kind of architects types and such, all of these, that. Now, the other one, which is also important here, is the work that we're doing at the Louvre. Since then, I think Shayari has mentioned, we're now working on two wings at the Louvre. One is Roman, Byzantine, and early Christian, and the other one is the Islamic wing. So it is a vision that the Louvre started. That of course the Louvre is known for the Mona Lisa, and now also known for the theft, but. But I think hopefully that will past. But one thing that Laurent Sakar, the president, who is my client, is trying to do is then learn from having the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, right? How to really talk about the materials. Basically, the part that I'm involved with is from the years 0 to the year around 800, which is around the peak of the Roman Empire, leading on to the birth of religions, from Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and all the others, and what happened in the world at that time. Why we reform religions and now we have religions, and talked about how religions actually relate to each other. So in a way, the narrative is trying to get people to understand that the other people that you're killing might not be as different than you, right? So that's, I mean, of course, it's a high hope, but hopefully, our beautiful display can make people feel like they can love the others. Yeah. Anyway, so this is part of that. We start construction right now. The first section will open 2027 for President Macron to put a plaque on, and then we continue to move on to around 2030. So this is moving on forward. We recreate everything to talk about this. These are one of the most beautiful, most Byzantine mosaic that has not been installed. So we install all of that. We talked about how we repurpose some of this part in the Louvre has not been used. This used to be the jail, so we renovate that and went to gallery for textiles and very precise manuscript. This is the Islamic wing itself that we reinstall all of the object within this building. You see that, again, part of that. Again, this is, okay, trying to kind of renew that part as well. So this is not purely architecture. This is mostly scenography that my team has worked and trying to kind of bring in that sense of notion. Talking about empathy, we have this building that started construction but now stopped in Russia, which right now we cannot talk about because there's an embargo or but sadly it is a museum that, not a museum, sorry, it's a building that's quite important because it represents Russian art form, which is ballet orchestra and also opera that in the city called Perm, which is basically the gateway to Siberia. That hopefully after the war ends, that the building will continue to be, because it's important for them to have this as part of their culture kind of renaissance. So that's that. Okay, this is part of our landscape project. I'm showing a lot of work, sorry. So this is a project we won competition 7 years ago, which now just about to start. It is this park and the music pavilion right under the castle in Edinburgh. And the reason why it's important because it talked about art and culture and nature in one space. We try to make the architecture invisible by integrating to the landscape and try to link. One thing that might not be easy to see is that our proposal won the competition because we link the park back to the castle, because the park one time used to be the moat for the castle and then were cut because of the train, and now we kind of urban acupuncture to bring everything back together. So that was part of that. This is a house that we've just opened, talk about nature. I particularly like this house because I think the idea is kind of cute. It's a house that I designed based on inspiration of this shelled mushroom. And the reason why it was not because the building code doesn't allow the building to be high, so we can kind of cantilever. So this is what the house looked like on rendering. This is a house look like when it's completed. So this is just finished last year, I think. This is a museum that I just came from. It is the biggest museum in Saudi Arabia. It is not a science museum. It is a museum of the future, science, technology, and art, especially for children. This is the first museum in Saudi that men and women can go together. Because they're now changing the protocol about men and women. So this is in a way the future, the vision of the future the Crown Prince is proposing as part of that. It's under construction, open 2027. And this is last image. This is the bridge that we built out of trash in Los Angeles on the river. I proposed the idea of building the bridge from the trash that people would throw into the river so that they can reflect on how they treat the river and what vice versa. This is kind of the message back to nature itself. Okay, that's that. Okay, so this is the end of my lecture, I guess. This is something I feel very strongly about that museums should do and architecture should do as well. So again, don't want to be a lone wolf in the bubble. Again, the idea of the symphony, going from that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kulapat. That was amazing. Um, no, it was record speed when I saw the 200 slides. I was like, how's he going to do this?
I know.
So we'll open up for questions, or if anyone wants to go back to project, maybe we have time. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Great. 1 second, we're just going to give these speakers the mic. The recording. Please projecting.
No, I said you covered so much, but so interesting. But let me get back to the one about the octopus and the peacock theory.
Yes.
Sounds really interesting to me. Museums or their function. Could you elaborate on that?
Thank you. Well, museum, the original museum is because it was palaces before, right? When you think about the Louvre, the Uffizi, all the way to the British Museum, so therefore it was convert from this very centralized plan. You come to the hall, impressive, and you get into each of the section, galleries, classrooms, canteen, and so forth, right? And you go up. The Met is the same way. So that prototype is very rigid because it forces everything to be under one entrance. You go in and do everything and you come back 10 to 5 p.m. And because I spend a lot of time talking to different people in different cities about why they don't go to museums. And one thing that always happens is like, we don't have time. When the museum is open, we work. And on the weekend, we're exhausted. We don't want to go to the museum on the weekend. Can museum not open late? Right. So some people said that, young people working. And so when I told the museum, why are you not working? Why are you not open late? They say, we can't because everything has to be open. We have 50 guards. 50 guards have to be there. So it's like, okay, there must be a way because maybe you don't have to open all of it. Maybe one section. So that's and then I coined the term because peacock see impressions and so centralized, and octopus is the opposite. So the idea was like each part of the museum, cafe, event, classrooms, even gallery can be sticking out like tentacles into the different things. And they can be, not everything has to be from the same security level also, right? So they can kind of have their own opening. Some of the case studies, like, the Speed Art Museum is built that way. So we make it sure that each wing or tentacle is self-contained. They have their own bathroom, they have their own access. So now they can do all kind of events. And not only the museum, the communities can then use the museum facility to do events without having to, museum have to kind of, like, well, you need 20 guards to do your wedding or something like that. Yeah, so it's been something that we work more a lot. And I think more and more people are now seeing that as a benefit because it's not just at night too, sometimes in the morning, to be able to do, because, I'm very interested in how museum can kind of be designed with people's schedule in mind, right? Because for children, by 3 o'clock, they free of class, right? And parents are still at work. So it'd be good for children to be at the school groups in museums, right? But all people are available in the morning. So they can use the museum in the morning. So I talked to them and said, like, can you organize this so it can kind of tailor to different people, right? So it's so, people kind of, I mean, a lot of these is like build it and they will come, right? But no, you don't have to. You know exactly who they are, right? So why don't you then be nice to them? And it's like, well, you have time, why don't you come in the morning, right? Rather than like, oh, look how great we are, you can come one day, right? So it's a little bit more that front, and the octopus allow it to be a bit more connecting with other people. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
So I think the experiencing art can be a very intimate, personal thing. And what makes experiencing art in a museum is that A, you're in a public space, and then B, you're with other people. What in your work have you maybe do you have any reflections or conclusions on what makes that experience work when you're in a public space and experiencing something that's so powerful?
Thank you. It's so key, right? Because it comes down to connection, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be an isolated room for you to have a connection with an artwork, right? But I feel, you know, I feel like I'm a matchmaker between art and people. So my job is to make magic between art and people. But then I should leave the room. Architects mostly don't want to leave the room. Architects like, I'm here. I'm here. Like, look at me. And you guys are here because of me. But if you're a good matchmaker, you set the light, you set the tone, you get a good moment, and people are comfortable and art look great, right? So then they can kind of do their own magic. So I'm trying to do that. But I think you touch on a very important point because, it comes down to how you define success of the museum, right? Because museums don't have any other way of measuring success by how many people to come through it, like the turnstiles. Oh, we have 10 million people, great, right? But I mean, 10 million people have terrible experience. We can't count that, right? The quantitative measure of success of museum need to be done, but how do we do that? Survey, questionnaires, not really, right? So that's a part that I think we need to kind of propose because I mean, if you talk to a lot of people, we all like museum that we can get lost in, right? We just found ourselves in like this moment and discover an art object like, wow, this is wonderful. But because museums are now designing so that people cannot do that. Like when you look at MoMA, which is one of the best collection on earth, it's like conveyor belt. You walk in front of the building and you move to another building, and then if you spend too much time, the other person's already like nudging you. So it become that but out of necessity, right? So in that case, we need to perhaps balance between people that need to have a quick look and people that have more, kind of contemplative look and be able to give them both. Yeah. Because there are people that only have an hour and try to cover the whole museum, right? Yeah. Yeah. One thing on that note, I mean, since we talked about museum here, that I've been advocating a lot at the Louvre as well. I'm working on the National Museum in India, which will be even bigger than the Louvre. Um, and a lot of people don't like it, but I do, is the idea of using AI to assist experience planning. And this is something that I learned from my friend at Disneyland, right? I mean, if you see tourists showing up at the Louvre at 9:30, it's so sad. It's like cattle. Everyone come in, no idea where you're gonna go. Everyone's like Mona Lisa, like rush to the staircase, go into the same at the same time, take photograph, and then what next, right? Almost everyone had that experience, and they talked to Laurence, the person's like, you can use AI, like let me show you what Disneyland does, right? Because everyone already buy a ticket online. And you can say, okay, well, I have 5 hours to spend here with two kids. These are the three things I'm interested in, and I want to have lunch, right? And AI just like, well, if that's the case, you should go to here first and go here and look at the Messiah at 12 and then have lunch. And then you can avoid all the crowd, right? It's so easy, but no one has done it. And museums like, oh, no, no, we don't like technology. It's like, yes, but look at your sad visitors here, right? The same thing. We're using that in India because they're so like afraid of people, like the stampedes and everything like that, which is, it's so unintelligent to not give people an opportunity to have a good moment when you can, right? And people show up at the gate in the early wanting to see something, and they have no idea what else is available. They can plan ahead of time. They can see. So I'm an advocate of helping people plan that. Yeah.
Don't you think it's high time that there was legislation that 20% of the site should be left for landscaping and trees? Because when you think of Thailand, I've been there dozens of times, and the endangered species. 50 years ago, there were so many birds. Singapore has lost almost all its wildlife because of this heavy building activity. So is it in Colombo, so that well, I designed a hotel which was 80% landscape and 10% building. we replanted 1,200 trees, right? So you try to bring back the ecology of, between the rural area and into the, don't you think they should legislate municipality-wise or urban development authority of having certain percentage, you must have this amount of, land left for, and the public then has access to it as well. What do you think?
I agree, but I also don't know how that can happen in a capitalist society that we live in today, right? I think Singapore may be the closest because they control the land, right? The government can, and you've seen notable examples of Singapore. Even that they have, your point about density, right? They are balancing density with open space, and even in the density, they put greens on the facades, right, to reduce the heat gain from air conditions and other things. So I think you're right. I think there's a way, and I think you're right that we need to, perhaps the bigger question is like, how many people is too many, right? Should city be allowed to grow as much as a cancerous tumor, right? Could we define that in this particular structure of an urban settlement, with the ratio of these, perhaps this city should be 2 million people. And if we have more, we should do another city rather than keep climbing on and trying to kind of expand everything to support, the fringe, which happen in every country, right? So I think that's a bigger question, as you said, is how do we live together? And my concern, and because I feel, I feel like architecture need to make people like each other, because there's so many reasons for people to kill each other. Like, I can kill everyone from the way to work, right? So like someone cut in front of me, someone not treat me with respect. There's so many reasons why we don't like other people in the city. But if there's a way to kind of give everyone a little bit more space and all of that, I completely agree. But I don't know how to. I think you might have to run for prime minister. I'm serious. Yeah, we need more architects as prime minister.
So sorry, you were saying, how do you soundproof or sort of sound treat an open courtyard? The building in Thailand you were speaking of?
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
The Deep Museum.
Yes.
That one, I think we do it with moving things because it depends on what kind of event. There's just two space. There's the courtyard where you have the Alicia Quade's sculpture, the globes, right? And then there's space under, which I didn't show, which is just a parking garage in concrete but high ceiling. So what we do on the garage is we have acoustic on the ceiling, and we are putting in these mobile absorbing panels that work both up and down. But it also depends on what kind of music you are playing. If it's folk song or is it rap party. So any acoustic engineer will be able to give you that solution, because it's actually easier in a courtyard because you are able to bring a lot of accommodation to make the sound absorption work.
But I think you said it was next to an expressway. So the sound from the expressway doesn't.
Oh no, I'm sorry. No, the expressway was that we have an art billboard that you can see from the expressway, but we have a wall between the expressway and us, so the sound will not come into the space. You must be an engineer. Yeah, we right on the port of Bangkok, so there's a big expressway there. And so we want to do the billboard so that they can see the billboard from the expressway. But we have a wall that kind of they cannot see into the courtyard, so the sound will not come through. Oh, that looked like a question.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm no architect. I'm basically a retailer. Just out of
Even better,
curiosity.
yes.
Do you believe in permanency, or should there be change when it comes to the floor plans? Once the initial setups are done, do you align yourself, if it's a museum or in any space, would you align yourself to a seasonal calendar and then do different kinds of changes and then run with the floor plan, or do you take indicators of the footfall and then uh, do do changes, or do you just keep the artifacts permanently placed, or is it a mix of both? I'm sorry, the question is all over the place, but then I hope you got the crux of it.
That you talked about in the museum context,
Yes.
right? I think yes. Well, it's not just me, but also the curators and the museum kind of leadership, right? But in an ideal world, it's like your body, right? In your body, the cell change every three. I mean, almost like the saying is, in 3 years, none of your cell is old. But the identity is there, right? You still know what it is. I think in the museum world, the way that we try to do is that there are what we call anchor pieces, right? That should be there. Like if you go to the Louvre and the Mona Lisa is not there, you're going to be pissed, right? So these moments need to anchor a different part to kind of, in a way, I also call it ambassadors, to be able to kind of link you back to a deeper story of that particular section, right? So those, sometimes you have rotation you can change, right? But that should be, but everything around it should change. And one thing that we work in the project at the Met, that's why I mentioned about the casework, is that it's so important for the casework to be easy to use so that the curators and their team can actually change them themselves, right? Because I mean, and I'm a big advocate of some of these materials are quite old, but the visitors could not care. Like, let's say if you go to a gallery and there's a civil war in Africa, right? You want to understand how is it related to this gallery, even though these materials are made, 200 years ago. But it's like, but it's the same country. How are you? How as a kind of a smart ass, you was like, how can this not addressing the issue today? Right? But so in reality, you want the gallery to be able to address that, whether through video or some objects who talked about that. I think more and more museums are now interested to do that. Uh, we have many curators in the room. The curators are the gatekeeper, right? They love their collection. They don't want anything to be, but at the same time, if you talk about the public come in, it's like, well, I heard about this war in Syria and you have a Syrian material, how can you not talk about those people, right? So stuff like that that allow them to entry into the understanding is more important. Whereas, the old museum is about there's only one way to look at it, and it's what the curator wants you to look at it. But in the museum today, which we prototype some of these in Chicago, which I worked many years ago, on the media, which in a way take the power a little bit away from the curators. So using digital media, museums still trying to figure out how to use digital media in the art experience, right? So for example, if you go to Chicago, it's not on all pieces, but some pieces, it would say, what do you want to know? Right? Do you want to know about the history? Do you want to know how old this is? Do you know how much this is? The question everyone wants to know is how much it is. Like, it's known. Like, if you ask someone, what's one thing you want to know about an object, they want to know how much it is. First, you don't even know how old. So it's okay to talk about it. It's like, well, the closest object to that was sold at auction at 5 million. Done. Right? So once they know that, they can do something else. But if you don't give them that, they feel like, why are they not talking about, So anyway, so in this case, it allows people to have an engagement to that. And back to your point, with the changing, you can also do a lot with digital media, which again, I'm somewhat of an advocate for that because it's impossible for any given museum to tell the full story. Even though as rich as the Louvre or the Met, you cannot, the temple where the object come from is not in the room, right? And a lot of these objects are actually made to be in the temple. So therefore, you're already missing the point. You cannot be taking, and a lot of these objects are hacked from an architectural context. So you see this as if it's a Greek sculpture, but in reality, it's an object of worship in a section that you need to understand. So you only can make that connection through storytelling, whether it's a video or something, people get it like, oh, now I get it, why this is here and why is that. So on that note, I think more and more, I think people will be using, but people are concerned about if you have digital media, people keep looking at the screen and forgot to look at the art. There's a way to do it, but anyway, so that's a long way of answering your question.
Thank you.
Oh, we have another customer.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I had a question around the idea of the colonial approach to exhibitions and museum making. And since you spoke about it, I'm curious as to any examples you see from our own cultures in exhibition display systems or the idea of museum making that is not the kind of museum we're familiar with today.
Thank you. Well, the Louvre is definitely one, right, where they're trying to mix, so they have different sections, Roman, Byzantine, Islam, early Christian, and even Judaism, to be able to talk about those outside of the canon of its own kind of history is one. But the best example, in response to your question, would be the project I'm doing right now in India, which has not been announced, but I can talk briefly about it. It is Prime Minister Modi's vision to tell the Indian story, right? So, but it's in a colonial building. It's two British-built 100-year-old palaces that is being converted to a museum. And the museum is called UK Yukin Bharat Museum, which is timeless, everlasting India. And so this museum, back to your point about museography, is that it doesn't cover India through chronology or through geographic concept. It talked about themes that have happened in Indian civilization that juxtapose things from 4,000 years ago with things today, like sari, like ornament, like adornment, but talk through that themes. So this is a way, success or not, in 3 years you will know, but it's trying to address in different way because India has its own problem. But because if you follow the chronological story of India, it does include the whole country. You go from Harappan, you go to Mughal, you go through that, right? And then the rest of the country is not included at all, even though as if it doesn't exist in the history flow of the civilization. So you have to find a different way of telling your culture that allow each of the pieces to be part of the story. Like in Thailand, because Mr. is here, for example, if you look at the history of Thailand, of course, it's Sukhothai, Ayutthaya, and then Bangkok, right? But what about the rest of the country? Why are we not talked about this as if it's not, right? So it become, again, somewhat of a not only colonial, but a different way of looking at this mixture of fluid culture that, so I hope that more and more people will learn culture that way because we still learn culture the old way, right? Like we learn culture from like this is our country look like, this is where it is, so the way culture is learned in school also define what the museum experience is. So if you don't change in school, it's so difficult for a museum to represent culture in a different way. But I think that there's more and more, new cultural curators who think about culture in a different way. So hopefully that will take time for a museum to take on and maybe change the experience.